All right, hey guys, Mr. Kyle Myers Mathematics, and let's just jump back into it. We had quiz 1 before, working on quiz 2 today, and gonna click start task and do it and show you how to do it. This is not meant as like a cheat guide, because if you get all the questions right on quizzes 1 through 4, not because you knew them, but because you know all the answers, it's kind of just gonna bite you later because you're gonna have a lot of difficulty on all the practices. You're gonna work on the practices and you'll be like, oh my goodness, I don't know any of this stuff, because it's a diagnostic. So this is kind of more meant as like if you weren't sure why you missed a certain problem, how you could have worked out the solution to that problem on top of what Khan Academy already explains. Sometimes the explanations are good, sometimes they don't really quite do it for you. And so that's what this is meant for. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. Start task, skill levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. Go ahead and go to the directions here, blah, blah, blah. It's not timed. However, I would recommend not spending longer than, because I think it's 10 questions, not spending longer than about 15 minutes, just because that's about how much time you have, about a minute and a half, a little less maybe. Well, it depends on the section. So I would probably go 15 would be like the max. Maybe more like 12 or so. Really, like, if you know it, you know it, and if you don't, you don't. This is a diagnostic, so don't try to kill yourself figuring something out that you really don't know how to do. Okay, but let's go ahead and get started here. There are 10 questions, so you'd probably want to set the timer for about 12 to 15 minutes, no more than 15 probably. And I'm gonna move this over. Now that I've started this, I'll be able to move this, give myself a little more space on my screen here, like so. And that should be plenty of space on my board here. Zoom in on my board a little bit, all the way to about 100%. And I've got kind of like some grid lines on this thing. Those are actual grid lines, just in case I need to graph something. But they made them kind of light so that it's not really getting in the way if I just want to like write stuff on the board here. So that's what that is. Okay, so here's the first problem. It says, which of the following best describes the solutions to the inequality shown below, or shown above? Um, what you could do is you could plug in the numbers. However, if you look at two of the answer choices, there's like negative 16 thirds and negative 8 thirds. So um, this is supposed to be a non-calculator. So I probably wouldn't try to plug those in. You could maybe try to plug in one of the others and see if that works, because that's faster. Plug-in methods are faster as long as it's not too difficult to plug in the thing. So we could try that actually. If we plug in, let's say we plug in 0. 0 is pretty easy to plug in. If I plug in 0, it would be 3, 0, plus 4 over negative 2, and that's supposed to be less than negative 2. So that would be just 0 plus 4 is 4. 4 times 3 would be 12 over negative 2, negative 6. Okay, so we needed to basically be negative 2. So it looks like that's not going to work out. What about negative 3? Right? Well, let's try it. Negative 3 plus 4 and negative 2. Oh, yeah. So then that's going to be 1 times 3 is 3. And then you have 3, so that's going to end up being just 1 there. So that's 3 over negative 2, which doesn't turn into anything. So, which is be 3 over negative 2. So, unfortunately, it's not B or D. It's neither of those options. So it is probably going to be either A or C. And yeah, so we could still plug those in. And if you're comfortable with fractions, you could do it that way. But if not, then what you would do is you just straight up solve it, just like you would normally do. And that's what we'll do now. So 3b plus 4, or negative 2. If I times both sides by a negative 2, negative 2, I'm going to times that on both sides. So that's going to make 4. It's going to flip the sign. Don't forget to flip that sign. You can always check it later on a number line as well. So it's not a huge deal if you forget to flip the inequality sign as long as you double check your answer. So there's that. All right, and then we have b plus 4. And then at this point, you could either distribute the 3 or you could just divide it. You could do either one. You could distribute or divide. I'm going to divide, actually, because I think that's less work. So then I have that. And then I have 4/3 less than b plus 4. I would subtract 4 from both sides. But how do I actually do that? 4/3 minus 4, which is 4/1. Here's what I like to do. If the denominators don't have anything in common, you just do what I call crisscross applesauce. Criss, keep the sign, cross over some applesauce. 3 times 1 is 3. So that's going to be 4 minus 12, which is the opposite of 12 minus 4. 12 minus 4 would be 8, so it's the opposite of 8. 3. And it looks like we get C. Looks like we get C. So C is the answer. Oof, okay. That takes a while. That was a tough one. They really started off with a bang there. Let's see what they got for the next one. So at Owl's Athletic Club. Okay, by the way, with word problems, the most important thing about word problems is the numbers. The numbers are the most important thing about them. So 25, 40, $12,250, X, and Y. Those are all the numbers. X and Y are numbers as well. They're letters, but letters are numbers we don't know yet. So those are all the numbers. And then the context behind the numbers is helpful so that we know useful ways to put the numbers together. And then, of course, what the question's asking for. So every word problem it's got 3 important things about it. What are the numbers? What do they mean? And what do they want? What are the numbers? What do they mean? What do we want? So 25, 40, 12, 250, X and Y. What are all of those things? Okay, so monthly membership for a student. So students, 25. Adults, 40. Okay. Athletic overseas, 12, 250 in membership fees. So that's the total. Okay. What's X? X is the adult memberships. Y is the, hold on, other way around. Student memberships is X. Adult memberships is Y. So if the student membership is 25 and the number of student memberships is X, then the 25 must go with the X. Because it wouldn't make sense to put the 25, which represents student monthly membership fee, with the Y, which represents the number of adult memberships, right? It doesn't make sense. You got to compare apples and apples. So the 25 has to go with the X, which means it already has to either be A or C. And then the other thing is, if it's $25, what's the monthly membership fee? It's $25 per month, right? And or per student, right? So it's per month per student, but specifically per student because we're talking about numbers of students here. So per student, right? And that says student. It's a little sloppy, but it says student. Then if we multiply by the number of students, X students. So now if you look at it like this, the students and the students, it's like they're one's in the numerator, one's in the denominator. If you treat the word like its own variable, units are kind of like variables in that they can cancel each other out to help us to set up equations properly. So if I have students in the numerator and students in the denominator, they cancel, and I'm left with $25 times X. That represents dollars. It no longer represents students. The individual things represented students, but the term 25x represents dollar amounts. And then you add that to another dollar amount, and that equals the total dollar amount, which is 12,250. All of them are equal to 12,250, so that's not super helpful by itself. But it's going to have to be 25x, not x over 25, because that's how the units go together. So 25x, and the only one that has 25x is A. So we're on to the next question. Okay. Circling the xy plane has a center at blah, 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 and a radius of blah, blah, blah. Which of the following is an equation of the circle? This is a vocab question. Period. There's no math. Very little math. There's basically no math. It's a vocab question. It's one of those you either know it or you don't. And the thing you have to know to get the question correct is what is the equation of a circle? The equation of a circle. Not x minus y, jk, lol. X minus h squared, y minus k squared, r squared, which comes from the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Okay? So x minus h represents the a distance, horizontal distance. The b is representing the vertical distance, the y minus k. And then the r is the radius, or the slanted, usually always slanted, side of the triangle within the circle. And so that's the equation. If you know the equation, you can figure out the answer. If you don't, then there's not really a good way to figure out the answer without knowing the equation. So definitely need to commit that equation to memory. There's really not a good way around it. I've tried. The only ways that you can get around the equation are like 10 plus more times complicated than just knowing the equation. So trust me, it's not worth it. Just the equation. If you know the equation, you'll know the answer. By the way, how to use the equation is also important. Minus h minus k. So that means we need to flip whatever we have. So it's going to be minus 3/4. Okay. So that means it's got to be either a or b. And then it's also minus a half, which a and b both have minus a half. So it's definitely still between a and b. And then the other thing too is that it's r squared. So if they say the radius is 3/5, it's not equal to 3/5. It's equal to 3/5 squared. So 3 squared and 5 squared, which would be 9/25. So the answer is B. All right, next one. F of x equal to 2x plus 1. G of x is equal to x squared plus 7, which of the following is equal to f of g of x. F of g of x. There's not really a good way to plug that in. So you kind of just have to do this one like you would normally do a problem, I guess. And that would be to just kind of do it, right? So if you're not familiar, f of g of x basically just means that it's f of, and then what is g of x? G of x is x squared plus 7. Okay, what is f of x? F of x is 2x plus 1. So it's 2, f of x is 2x plus 1. So f of something else would just be 2 something else plus 1. See that? F of x, so the variable is x. If there's some other variable besides x that goes in the parentheses, then you substitute all the x's for the new thing in parentheses, which is now x squared plus 7. So then we distribute the 2, 2x squared, 14, plus 1 would just be 15, so that's 2x squared plus 15, which is C. Next. Ooh, triangles. Interesante. Okay. So, what's going on with these triangles, other than the Triforce? Dun, 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 dun. Just kind of reading it here and scratching my eye. And I also don't know how to say that word. I'm going to try. Serpinski. Maybe. Could be. Triangle, picture below, fractal image. Four congruent equilateral triangles. And removes the center one from the design. The area of the design after insects can be shown using the following expression. Okie dokie. What does 25 root 3 over 2 signify in the expression? Well, if n is 0. Anything to the 0 power would be 1. Um, so here's the thing, is whenever they're asking questions like this, questions that are asking for what something means or what something signifies, the best thing to do, almost always, is to either plug in 0 or make something equal to 0, and that really, really helps to understand what's going on in the problem. So that's why I plugged in 0, because that's the go-to. Okay, it wasn't like I just magically knew to do that. That's just something you always do. So just when in doubt, for these kinds of questions, plug in 0. So anything to the 0 power is 1, and then it would just be 25 root 3 over 2. So the area of the first triangle, not the n equals 1 first, but the n equals 0 first triangle, that area would be 25 root 3 over 2. Because, so it's according to the pattern or whatever, right? And then let's say n is 1. So then it would be 3/4 of that original area, and then 3/4 of the next, and the next, and the next, and the next. So, yeah. Each step is going to multiply by 3/4, not by 25 root 3 over 2, so it's not A. Original figure had an area, yeah, this is going to be that one. But let's look at the rest just in case. With this kind of question, I would highly recommend looking at all of the answer choices, because sometimes they can be really tricky on how they word things. So let's see, each step increases the area by that. No, that's like an even worse option than A. After many steps, the figure will have an area of 25 root 3 over 2. No, after many steps, the area would be like close to 0, actually. And then there's I would be guessing. So yeah, that works. Okie dokie, 2013. Wow, it's so long ago. Even at the time of this video, but when you're watching this, who knows? It could be 3,224 AD. You're watching YouTube. If YouTube is still around in 1,000 years, I will definitely commit to buying some stock. 2013 median monthly rent for a one-bedroom apartment in San Francisco was $2,750. Okay. In 2013, monthly rent was that much. Equation below models the median monthly cost for one-bedroom apartment. T years. Okay. Moved to San Francisco in 2015. Paid the median price. Rent a one-bedroom apartment. How much less would James have paid each month in rent if he had moved to San Francisco in 2014 and rented a one-bedroom apartment for the median price? Okay, let's be really careful with this because they could be trying to trick us. Paid the median price to a one-bedroom apartment. How much less would James have paid each month? Yeah, okay. I don't think there's any tricks because they really should have specified how much he would have paid in rent initially. Because if he moved in 2014, let's say, instead, then in the next year he would be paying more because they can, you can have your rent raised on you. So, but I don't think that's what they're trying to go for there. They would have added more context if there was some sort of trick like that in it. So it looks like it's fairly straightforward here. We're comparing 2015 to 2014. So the simple thing to do would be to plug in the right t values. You could even plug in 2015 and 2014 if you really wanted to. Technically it wouldn't be 2014 and 2015 that you would plug in for t, but you could still do that and it would still give you the correct answer. Or just look at the equation. The equation is 250t plus 2750. 2750 was the initial amount. The y-intercept is the initial amount. The slope is how much it's changing by. So if it's going to change by $250 every year, then we're comparing 2015 to 2014, then it's just going to change by $250. James moved to San Francisco in 2015, paid the median price. How much less would he have paid if he had moved to San Francisco in 2014 instead? So, $250, because there's a 1-year difference. All right, number of radians in a 540-degree angle can be written as a pi, where a is a constant. What is the value of a? Okay, so number of radians in a 540-degree angle can be written as a pi, where a is a constant. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to convert radians, convert degrees to radians. So we want to go from degrees, we know the degrees to radians. Sorry, my cursor's a little sloppy today. We're going from degrees to radians. Okie dokie. Well, if we're going to do that, we need to know how to convert between degrees and radians. So I would recommend just memorizing this, but it is kind of in the formula sheet. On the formula sheet, if you look, they're listed as sentences. It'll say that there are 360 degrees in a circle, and it'll also say that there are 2 pi radians in a circle. So if there are 540 degrees, we'll put D here for degrees, 540 degrees, and we're looking for a pi radians, put R for radians. Okay, well, how many degrees are in a circle? 360 degrees are in a circle, and that is 2 pi radians. So you could do it this way. You could also just times it. You could times 540 by pi over 180. That would be the simplest way to do it. So what I would recommend if you want to, go to the next level here is you times by either pi over 180 or 180 over pi if you're going to convert from degrees to radians or radians to degrees. This is the kind of the backup way to do it. It's a little bit more complicated, I think, but it would be probably one of the best ways to do it if you didn't have that little tidbit memorized and you had to use the formula sheet. You could do it this way. By the way, we could cancel out some pi's, and all these units would cancel as well, and some zeros. Just a bunch of stuff, actually. So we only have a 2 and a 54 there, so that would make 108. And then that would be 36a. We divide by 36. And what would that be? Well, does that go in evenly? I think it does. Times it by 3. Yeah, goes in evenly. Equals 3. Yeah. Of course, this is a non-calculator, so you'd have to just know that. You could also reduce it. If you didn't see that it was divisible evenly there, you could reduce it by, let's say, 3 or 6 or 2 or something. And then just, whittle it down until you get the answer. The faster way, the even faster way, would be to see if you can divide 540 by a multiple of either 360, 180, 90, 60, 45. You just check for special right triangle kind of numbers, basically. And whichever one it divides by, that's however many radians you would have, basically. So 540 divides by, doesn't divide by 360, but it does divide by 180. And it would divide by 180 3 times. Looks like it was 360 and then another 180. Yeah. So it goes into 180 3 times. And so it would be 3 pi. So 540 degrees is 3 pi radians. But they wanted to know the value of A, which would just be 3. So a lot of different ways to do that one. Okay, 39 students in Miss Salazar's chemistry class. Miss Salazar divides the class into 9 lab groups of 4 or 5 students each. What would be the number of lab groups with 5 students? Okay, so with this one, what you could do is you could do a plugin, or you could do like a guess and check. But a plugin is kind of like just a faster way to do a guess and check. I mean, you could just guess the right answer, but if you guess the right answer, then it would literally be one of the answer choices, right? So use multiple choice to your advantage. There isn't really a nice equation that you could make for this because it's 4 or 5, and when you try to turn that into an equation, it's meh. So instead, what we would do is to say, okay, the number of lab groups with 5 students. Okay, well, if the answer choice is A, then we have one lab group with 5 students. 39 minus 5 would be 30 what? 34. Okay. And then all the other groups would have to have 4 students in them. But 34 doesn't divide by 4. It divides by 2, but then that's 17. So 34 doesn't divide by 4. There can't be a group with 5, only one. There can't be exactly one group with 5 students, because then there'd be 34 students left, and you wouldn't be able to split the rest of the students into even groups. See how that works? So do it again. Actually, just do kind of like that. Let's say 2 groups. Okay, so 2 groups, 39. 2 groups of 5 would be 10. So that's 29. 29 is not even, so that's definitely not going to go in. So we don't even need to check that one. What about 3 groups? 39 minus 15. How much would that be? 9 minus 5 is 4. 3 minus 1 is 2. Ah, that does divide by 4. So then if that divides by 4 evenly, get 6, then that should be the answer. We could check 5, but if there were 5, that'd be 25. Let's see, just to be sure. So let's see. That would be a 4 and a 1. Yeah, 14, which does not divide by 4. So it's not that one. It's gotta be the one with 3. All right, next one. We're rounding this off here. Okay, which of the following could be the equation of the graph above? All right, so what's happening on this graph is it looks like it's a polynomial. All the answer choices, by the way, are polynomials, so it's definitely a polynomial. And then what else is happening? Well, it's going through the y-axis, somewhere around 50 or so. So that could be a point that we check. So it's somewhere around 50 or so. We could plug in 0 for x and see if we get 50 for y. That's one thing you could do. But the other thing that's happening is that it's crossing the x-axis at -3 and at 4. So if we plug in -3 for x, we should get 0 for y. If we plug in -3 for x, we should get 0 for y. That does not happen with choice A. So if you plug in -3, it's -3 minus 3 for choice A, and that wouldn't give you 0, and then the other stuff wouldn't give you 0 either. So when we plug in -3 for x, we don't get 0 for y for choice A, so it's not A. It's got to be something with x plus 3 in it. Because if I plug in -3 for x, I should get 0 for y. -3 plus 3 is 0. So it could be B, or C, or D, just based on the fact that we have an x-intercept at -3. Okay, then we also have an x-intercept at 4. So that would be x minus 4. B, C, and D also have x minus 4. So that doesn't narrow it down that much, except there's another rule about how polynomials cross the x-axis. It's a little bit more tricky. And if you didn't know this rule, the backup would be to plug in 0 for x and see if the y value is 50. So that's your backup plan. But this plan is better if you know the rule. The rule is if the graph touches and turns, or you could say bounces, if it bounces off the x-axis, then you have to have an even power for that factor. And it does at 4. So x minus 4, which results in the x-intercept of 4, has to have an even power because it bounces off of the x-axis at that x-intercept. So that's why the answer would have to be D. And again, if you didn't know that, the option A would be to just, know that. But then also, your backup plan would be to plug in that y-intercept. Plug in 0 for x, and you should get 50, roughly, out for y. So that would be your backup for that one. All right, and then last but not least, number 10. And then if this has been helpful, you can check other things on the website, myersmathematics.com, and other YouTube videos, things like that. So question 10 out of 10, we have a rational function. Which expression is equivalent to the above? So that means that probably something is going to cancel, because all the answer choices look like it's less stuff than the original. So we want to factor it. So x squared plus 8x minus 20. So factoring, we want to do 2 things that multiply to 20 and they have to go together to make 8. So 1 and 20. One of them has to be plus, one of them has to be minus to make a minus 20. That wouldn't work. Right, that would make 19. What about this? Aha, that would work. Negative 2 plus 10 is 8. So that's how you factor that one. What about the other one? X cubed plus 9x squared minus 10x. So with this one, you have a greatest common factor you want to factor out first before we do regular factoring like we just did on the previous one. 1 and 10 looks like it'll work. So that'd be that, and that, and that. So it looks like the x plus 10s would cancel out of those two. If we relisted this out, it'd be x minus 2, x plus 10, over x, x minus 1, x plus 10. Those cancel, and then you're left with x minus 2 on the top. Looks like that could be either C or D. And then on the bottom, I have x times x minus 1. And then if you multiply that back out, then it would be x times x is x squared, and then x times 1 minus x. So it's got to be option D. And there we go. And that's how you do diagnostic quiz number 2. That's it for this one. So again, hope that's helpful, and I'll catch you in the next video real soon.